True and disturbing horror stories from Neighbor from Hell. Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You move into a new place, maybe an apartment, maybe a townhouse. The walls are thin. You're unpacking boxes, finally trying to relax for the first time, and then you hear it. It's not a party. It's not a normal couple arguing. It's something else. A pattern that makes no sense. A repetitive knocking at 3 a.m. A smell you can't identify but that twists your stomach. That constant feeling that, on the other side of that cheap drywall, there's a portal to hell. This is fear that doesn't come from a ghost or a monster, but from something far more real, far closer. The fear of the neighbor from hell. You can lock your door, you can close your windows, but you can't seal the wall that separates your mental peace from the chaos next door. And believe me, that is the most insidious form of terror. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about how easily our lives can turn into a low-budget horror film because of a single rental decision. If you've ever lost sleep imagining the worst possible scenario happening in the apartment next door, if you've ever had to put on headphones just to drown out the anxiety seeping from your neighbor's door, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and leave a like if this video helps you breathe a little easier tonight. Because today on Deep Nightmare we're diving into real, disturbing horror stories about neighbors from hell, stories sent by you, proving that the worst monster doesn't live in the basement, but right next door. Here's the thing. Why is neighbor horror so powerful? A ghost? A ghost is supernatural. It has rules. You call a priest, you run, you escape. But a neighbor? They follow the same rules as you. They pay rent, they have rights, they're protected by the law. And that is where the horror gets interesting. Here's what most people don't realize. The neighbor from hell doesn't invade your physical space first. They invade your psychological space. Think of it as the broken boundary effect. Your home is supposed to be your sanctuary, the one place where you set the rules, where you decide what's safe. Your neighbor, with their noises, fights, or horrible smells, is essentially breaking that invisible boundary. They're teaching you day by day that you're not safe even under your own roof. And that's what crushes you slowly. It's like having a smoke alarm that goes off 3 times a night for no reason. There's no fire, but your body reacts with adrenaline and panic anyway. You become a hostage to the unexpected. One listener, Marina, sent in this story. She lived in a duplex. Her downstairs neighbor, who we'll call Mr. M, seemed to exist in another dimension. It started with smells. A chemical, heavy odor that seeped through the cracks and made her dizzy. But the real terror began when she noticed the sound pattern. Sometimes at 4 in the morning there were rhythmic knocks. Not music, not sex, just hammering. And then complete, suffocating silence. Marina wondered, what is he hiding? What requires this much physical effort in the middle of the night, followed by total silence? You can't stop imagining. Your brain starts building scenes, him constructing something, dismembering something, or worse, hiding something that will never see the light of day. The lack of explanation is the most terrifying part. Now you might think, Nick, it's just a weird neighbor. Everyone has one. And yes, true. But the difference between a weird neighbor and a neighbor from hell is the slow gas. Slow gas is that psychological process where the terror isn't immediate, it's gradual. You start questioning your sanity. Is the smell really that strong, or am I exaggerating? Did I actually hear that scream, or was it just the wind? The neighbor from hell isn't a stab, it's erosion. They slowly wear down your perception of reality. They force you to accept the unacceptable as routine. It's like the story of the slow gas, where the victim is exposed to a substance that gradually makes them doubt everything they see, hear, and feel. The neighbor from hell is your personal slow gas. This next story came from a couple in New York living in an old, elegant building. Their neighbor across the hall, Mr. K, was elderly and seemed harmless. At first they noticed he had a strange hobby. He collected glass eyes. Dozens, maybe hundreds, arranged on peculiar shelves. Weird but harmless. Here's where it gets disturbing. The couple started receiving anonymous emails and letters with details from their personal life, things that could only have been seen from inside their apartment. The wife, Sarah, started feeling watched. She was convinced that Mr. K could see through their peephole, or maybe he had installed something. After months of paranoia, Sarah's husband decided to test it. He covered their peephole and pretended to leave. Mr. K left his apartment shortly after and went to the trash room. The husband snuck to Mr. K's door and saw. Mr. K didn't have a regular peephole. He had removed it and replaced it with a tiny security camera lens that transmitted directly to a monitor inside his apartment, displayed above his collection of glass eyes. Mr. K wasn't collecting glass eyes. He was collecting the vision of other people's eyes. He wasn't just watching, he was recording and archiving their lives. The horror here isn't being caught, it's being consumed. He didn't want conflict. He wanted possession. That's privacy invasion elevated to pure terror. Now let's talk about religious distortion. Many of the deepest horror stories come from twisted beliefs, especially when they manifest in the apartment next door. When a neighbor uses faith, or their distorted version of it, to justify bizarre behavior, your ability to reason disappears. Most of us operate under shared moral rules. If your neighbor operates under the belief that they're guided by a higher entity, or purifying the neighborhood of some personal demon, they become immune to logic. They're not breaking the law. They're fulfilling a divine mission. And that kind of absolute certainty turns us into obstacles instead of people. This horrifying story came from an email sent by a former building janitor, João. He had a tenant on the top floor, Mrs. R, extremely reserved and intensely religious. At first there were chants, long guttural chants lasting for hours. But neighbors started noticing strange things. The red salt. There was always a trail of dark red salt at her doorway. João assumed it was just seasoning or dirt. The mantle. She never spoke to anyone. When she went out, she was always covered head to toe in a wool cloak, even in the heat. The terror peaked when the neighbors below complained about water noises. Not leaking, pouring. Constant water being dumped onto the floor, followed by screams of purification. Not her voice, but multiple voices. When João finally gained access during an emergency, which he faked out of fear, he saw the truth. It wasn't an apartment. It was a purification sanctuary. The floor covered in plastic tarp. A giant basin of filthy water in the center. Walls scribbled not with satanic symbols, but Bible verses written backward, in dried blood. And in the corner, a cage large enough for whatever she was purifying. The water wasn't for cleaning. It was for baptizing and drowning. João never found out who or what she was expelling, but he never forgot her expression when she saw him. Not guilt, but sacred certainty, the look of someone interrupted in a holy mission. This is terror disguised as virtue, and that is the scariest monster of all. Finally, what do you do when your brain says, this is a nightmare, but the law says no evidence? This is the last and cruelest torture of the neighbor from hell. The system is designed to handle facts, not chronic fear or subtle trauma. You call the police and say, my neighbor is staring at me for 3 hours holding an upside-down cross and whispering in Latin. Police see a neighbor standing legally on his property, and you sounding unhinged. This is where terror forces you into action. You have to become your own investigator. Without proof, the only person who looks like the neighborhood lunatic is you. This last story comes from Reddit, from a guy we'll call Alex, living in a quiet condo. His downstairs neighbor, Mr. P, was the quietest of all. And here's the final plot twist. Alex started having electrical issues. Flickering lights, tripped breakers. He called maintenance. They found nothing. Then Alex began hearing an electrical whisper beneath his bedroom floor, a low-frequency hum. He suspected Mr. P was stealing electricity. Then things escalated. Alex bought an electricity meter and found that an absurd, almost industrial amount of power was being consumed from below. He got a copy of the building's floor plan. And then he saw. There was no Mr. P. The unit below had been vacant and condemned for 5 years. The electrical noise, the power drain, the flickering lights, all coming from an officially empty unit. When the building was forced to enter the apartment, there was no Mr. P. Instead, they found a full illegal cryptocurrency mining operation. Hundreds of machines, huge fans, improvised wiring stealing electricity from the entire floor. The heat was so intense the paint was melting. But there was something worse. On the wall shared with Alex's bedroom, one of the mining rigs sat beneath a perfectly aligned 1-centimeter viewing hole, hidden behind a picture frame. The neighbor from hell wasn't a religious maniac or stalker. It was silent, faceless greed, hiding behind anonymity, watching and stealing from him. The desolation of an empty unit filled with machines running at the edge of collapse is the embodiment of modern terror. So what's the lesson? The lesson isn't to fear the supernatural. It's to fear silence and broken routines. To fear what people do when they believe their privacy protects them. If you're living with a neighbor from hell, record everything. Every noise, every smell, every whisper. Don't trust your memory, trust digital evidence. Document your sanity. Don't isolate yourself. Talk to friends and family. If your neighbor is slow gas, you need anchors to reality. Horror doesn't need demons. Sometimes all it takes is one thin wall, and a tenant with secret intentions to steal your peace, or your soul. Do you have a neighbor from hell story that left you panicked? I want to read it. Leave your disturbing story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the fear living right next door, subscribe to Deep Nightmare and hit the bell. Until next time, and may your next night be silent.